what do I say? Good evening to everyone? No, good afternoon. Okay. Right. So, yeah, I will start with, I will start sharing a little bit of my background with you. I was really fortunate to have, very progressive parents, and I was raised in a very democratic and secular environment. My father was in the freedom struggle, a Gandhian, and then he was, very much active in this nation-making phase of our country. He had a strong engagement with the city. My parents met actually while doing theater. They were part of the Indian National Theatre, again, another progressive theatre group, which kind of was more, supportive of the Congress, Indian National Congress. And so exposure to progressive modernism at that time for very easy for me through art, culture. It was an very exciting environment. I grew up. I could take my own decisions, and especially as a girl child, they saw to it that I get maximum freedom. I met my partner Arvind Adarkar. You see him here. While we were acting together in a play in the School of Architecture where we were studying together. And at the age of 20, he was already a social activist, in the neighborhood of the inner city of Mumbai. And in that sense, we grew up together. We grew up together, and we were exposed to the new wave films, theater, and through art exhibitions. So there was a lot of sharing. We shared our studios. I mean, we started our studio jointly after a few stints at other architects. Our ethics values were firm in accepting the project, and we shared them and soon we participated in the various struggles. Arvind was already active at the socially active at his neighborhood level, but then we soon participated in the struggles for housing rights for the slum dwellers. He was the one to initiate the new school Vaijanti just mentioned, but we lost him before we even started the school. So I'll talk about the school later on. I'm going to show you the projects which are which will cover housing, then one of the institutional projects, then the heritage management and urban design. As far as the policy interventions are concerned, I will, there's one, we were part of that struggle, as well as we were part of, suggesting changes in the development plan. Then the public open spaces and the gender, because I was, by the time we started our practice, and later as we were in the housing struggle, I was already part of the women's movement in the 80s. And then lastly, pedagogy section, I don't know whether I'll get time, but I'll definitely share at least one of the projects. Here, this is the city of Mumbai. This is India as a whole, and this is the city of Mumbai. If you see, actually closer, this is the Mumbai and the suburb. This is the island city. So during colonial time, the island city was mainly the active part of the city. This island city actually consists of 7 islands, which were then reclaimed. The lowest part, the tip, is the area which was called the colonial city, where mostly the Europeans lived, and if the non-Europeans had to stay there, they had to pay 10 times the rent. This is the city. I must say I'm born, brought up, and addicted to the city. The city was a colonial port, then it became an industrial city, and present boasts of being the financial center. But its financial identity is based on the industrial foundation, which was laid in the mid 19th century. This is an image which shows the layers of the city. You can see in the foreground there are some tenement housing of the working class areas. Then you have the railway line, north south, running north south. Then there is the textile mills, which you can see here. Beyond that is the open space green, and then beyond that you see the apartment buildings constructed during the 70s, 60s, which you can see are more or less walkable. And then after the 80s and 90s, after the liberalization, you can see the high rises. There are many more high rises. This particular image doesn't show the current skyline of the city. And at the background is so-called iconic ceiling of a city, which some of the architects are also proud of. This part is the colonial city, and you can make out with this gothic edifices. They are very well conserved and maintained, and this is still more or less this fort, what is called the fort area, is intact. Just north of the southern tip, there is the city, the real city starts, and this is the inner city or the trading city. Traders migrated from states like Gujarat and North, which were rich in their visual culture. And so you see in a multicultural society how there are these carriers of identities. So whatever was the architectural language which was in their original place from where they came to the city are replicated here. Whereas the immediately north of it, we're going from south to north, and then this is the textile industry district, which actually offers us a window to city's political and social identity. There is another, so these are the different cities within a city. This is also the textile mills, and most of them are closed now. Most of them are demolished. And this is the neighborhood which has the tenement housing known as the Chawls of Mumbai, and of course the mills and the new development. We come to the slums now. The slums are mostly in the suburbs, and after the textile, the surplus which was generated out of the textile industry, as I told you, there were nearly 70 textile mills, and and they were running very well. So the surplus generated out of this textile mills were not plowed back into the textile industry, but through that emerged other industries like pharmaceutical, automobiles, and electrical industries, and so on. And people from other parts of the country who were affected by droughts and unemployment were pushed in large numbers as migrants to this city. There was no provision of housing. That there is still no provision of housing for them. Unlike the textile workers who had the tenement housing, which were built by investors, and they could pay a small rent and live there. But for these new migrants, the only opportunity to live in the city is through the self-created slum colonies. And who lives in these slums? We can see that there are different kinds of people in slums. There are multiple demographics. They are migrants from different part of the city. They live there, but they also do a lot of income generating work. They are mostly for an unorganized sector, employed in the industry, so they don't earn very well. Then there are self-employed hawkers who are all over the city, and they're home-based workers and service workers like office assistants, drivers, and so on. there has been, there was a complete absence of policies for to address the issue of housing for the poor. On the other hand, in fact, there was a tremendous intolerance towards the slum, uh, which increased in the 70s and 80s. And the general impression was they were seen as eyesore, shameful to the city, pockets of crime, vices, and so on. And demolition drives undertaken by the local government were quite common in the 80s. And one of the major drive in 1986 was a large settlement in the upmarket of Parade, the southern side, which is newly reclaimed area, was demolished. So, and first time we see a major resistance from the people and activists on this, when these nearly 350 families were made homeless. And so my husband and I were also part of this struggle. There were many there not many. There was a long hunger strike undertaken by a very well-known film actress, and there were protest marches and so on. So it was it really got a good media support, and all this led to a very intense agitation. And finally, the government had to give 3.5 acres of land, which was given 3 kilometers away in the suburbs. But at least it was one of the, not only that it was one of the first victories, but it was in a way a recognition for the slum settlements, which were earlier only called illegal, informal, and so on. So, and then further, as this, the movement of, claiming rights over the city was, it was further accentuated. There was a legal support as well. The Supreme Court of India, it enlarged the meaning of life, which was mentioned in the constitution, that was extended to include right to shelter. And the court actually differentiated between the animal-like existence and a decent human existence when talking about the slums. Then there were policies for slum upgradation and development. So the upgradation mainly means providing drinking water, toilet facilities, street lighting, and so on. The slum redevelopment was actually demolishing the slums and creating new buildings, which were low-rise walkable apartments. And this money, a very small sum, was contributed by the slum dwellers, and it was subsidized by the government. This was perhaps a very good scheme, which which probably lasted only for a few years, because in 1996 the right-wing government brought in private players and there was public-private partnership. So public land was given. Most of the land which was occupied by the slums were the state-owned land or the local bodies owned land, and they were given to the private developers to free of charge to build homes in the for the markets. And in return they had to give the tenements free of charge to the existing slum dwellers. The problem with this kind of scheme was that the developer had a it kind of caught up their imagination, and they could house the existing residents in high rises, occupying only 1/3 of the plot. So instead of 100%, they are occupying only 33%, and the remaining is given for market development. And this is the scheme which is still on, in spite of repeated request to the government in terms of its inferior quality and unhygienic houses, and all very well proved during this pandemic last year. The policy still exists. So while we were active in the housing rights struggle, simultaneously I was also part of the women's movement in the city, and this was what we call the gender consciousness was emerging, and my work as an architect, housing act, and as an architect in our studio practice, as a housing activist, was parallel to this involvement. And in fact, whatever we did, we participated in outside, actually informed our practice as well. So this, just to give you a brief history of the gender movement, is the first stage was activism, which was, based on domestic violence and, unequal wages. Then there were legal battles, and mainly the first phase was, street marches and protest marches, and marching onto the households, which where we found dowry deaths or something. Then there were legal battles, where the women lawyers actually brought in new laws, and scrapped the laws which were discriminatory. One of these was a rape law. And then there was significant growth of scholarships and research concepts in the universities, which led to gender studies. Some of our architects, women architects who got together in 92, from all over India, and we had a conference in Mumbai, in the Mumbai University, and we formed this group called Women Architects Forum. So with the new concepts which were emerging, the concept of neutrality was amongst the concept that that kind of implicated the gendering of the disciplines, and the women doctors, women lawyers, women historians actually started revisiting their own work and practices. Of course, there were very few architects that time who thought of women. I was the one who thought that my discipline is very neutral, and how can my discipline or discriminate between the spaces designed for women and men? But it was much more complicated than that. So these women's groups brought in a new perspective and we realized that the spaces are designed differently for or perceived differently by men and women. Soon there was an opportunity for me. It was a really wonderful opportunity to participate in a workshop. The organization called YUVA, which is Youth for Unity and Voluntary Action, is active in many fields, and housing rights was one of the fields, and they were working in slums in Jogeshwari suburbs of Mumbai, and they wanted to do some housing project, and they wanted to motivate the people, so on. Although the housing project did not, take up, there were other problems, but I was able to take a workshop with the women, and it was a very exciting workshop where we made them do the role plays. So the women really started discovering the relationship of their own bodies to the space and of the activities to the space. And when they enacted the roles of their husbands and in-laws and children and themselves, and they realized the social hierarchy which is reflecting in the family as well as in the space. So this was a very creative way to articulate the experiences. We learned many, I personally learned many aspects of living in the slums. I realized that there are multiple layers of inhabitations which we're not aware of, and that their homes are constantly changing. The homes are not very not necessarily very safe for women or for anyone, and it's not protective. It can be very violent, and so on. So this is where we are showing them a layout model and getting their views in terms of what amenities need to be included in the layout. So after the discussion we had so these are the points which came up. Very few of these points. Of course, there should be affordable and safe housing, and there should be shelter homes for distressed women right in their neighborhood or in their colony, in fact. And these shelter homes should be for emergency as well as for temporary shelters. And then some of us architects were quite excited to design them. We brought out a booklet, but it remained just on the paper. Then there should be common workplaces, because there are many women go outside to get the raw materials, which they come home and assemble. So it's the home-based work, which is not very hygienic for the home and for the family, because they are all kinds of electronic components, or there could be some cotton material and so on. So in the discussion, it came out that the settlement should have independent workspaces for women, so women can get together and do their household work. So it's not a double responsibility for them while doing the work, while also doing the household chores. And this was one of the very unique kind of suggestions which which emerged out of the discussion. And of course the creche and safe toilets and all that. Well, all this would help some of us later, for intervening in the making of the development plan of the city. I'm going to show you the project which is called Nagri Nivara Parishad, which means Urban Shelter Committee. In short, we can call it NNP. This was a mass housing scheme for low-income families, mainly for vendors, and people from the lower strata of the society. It had to be affordable for the working class. And then a trust was formed by a well-known socialist leader, Mrunal Gore. And we were chosen as the architects for the project, and this gave an opportunity to suggest many requirements which had emerged from my earlier work with the with the women from the slums on the issue of gender and housing. So it was a large project, 25 hectares of the land. This is kind of a demographic, you can say that from the informal sectors these were, but they did not expect although the free housing scheme, the public private partnership I discussed earlier, was very much in the in the market, so to say. This group of people, or this trust, the socialist trust, decided that they would actually take contribution from a trust with the members, and these members contributed whatever they could over the years. And but then they were asking land from the government under the Land Ceiling Act, which was not easy. So it took nearly 8 years for this agitation to be successful. And then finally they got the land for constructing houses at a cost affordable to this section of the society, so that these people may not migrate to the slums. And NNP, the trust acted as a central agency on behalf of the members to complete the project. This was a tough site, there was a lot of work which went into the preparing it for construction. This is the kind of a built form which we created. They are just ground plus 3 walkable apartments, very small, just 350 square feet each, and the provision of these amenities like creche, women's center, sheltering prices, vocational training center for women. So we were able to incorporate them in our planning, because this socialist leader Mrunal Gore was very supportive, and at least they initially they started. We don't know, each of these apartment building has a small each cluster has a small, or supposed to be having a small creche. This is now 20 years, nearly 20 years ago, and but now it's become a very active and well-known cooperative model for the housing. I'll just go quickly. This is the layout. You can see there's a lot of green space which is interspersed within this. There are separate vehicle, pedestrian access, then two-way access for two-wheelers and access for the four-wheelers. This is when it was during the construction, and very very simple, very economical. Yeah, and then so these clusters, now different clusters have developed differently in terms of its social or community characters. So and each cluster has its now own identity. These are the bridges which we designed to connect um, all the buildings, and they have become very active social interactive spaces. Lastly, of course, um this barren land has become green and very active, except that the pedestrian areas which were designed in the layout have now are occupied by two-wheelers as well. My project, the second project, is the headquarters for UA, which kind of had multiple activities, like working with the street children and single women, as well as having a South Asian Institute for Human Rights Education. I'll just show you a few images. This is basically, the idea was to create a transparency because they're involved in different kind of social movements. There should be a lot of openness within. It's a small building, and so a lot of openness within the building. So there is a open courtyard here and an open terrace here, and all the functions are built around it. So if this is the South Asian Institute's offices, and it kind of straight away overlooks the space for the workshops for street children and single women. Quickly, I will go over the third project, which is a heritage conservation and management. There are many urban villages in the city still existing. But they are either coastal fishing village or agrarian villages. They were farming villages. They are under the threat of complete redevelopment through the real estate. But we required but on the other hand, they are also fond of their own built fabric. So there was so when we got this project, we realized that we need to enhance the sense of belonging. To the people should feel energize their sense of belonging towards their own community. They're very proud on one hand, but there is a tremendous lure for going in for redevelopment with the high rises and so on. So this dichotomy between conservation and development, especially in the heritage precincts, are really but they're exaggerated in the public discourse. So we thought that we will the whole process will be through consultations with the local communities and through urban design and guidelines for redevelopment. So it doesn't have to be straight away going for the high rises, but there could be some mid path also. We are talking about this space, which is the urban village. You can see the fabric here, and so this is the other parts of urban parts of this suburb. Anyway, I will go ahead. Yeah. So this is the fabric, just to give you a glimpse of how this is in the midst of a very urban kind of neighborhood. You have these villages as well. This is the well. These are the house types. This is one of the oldest houses, more than 100 years old. And then we thought that we should have discussions with the community. We had community meetings, and we asked them several questions just to provoke them. So there was a provocation to rethink about their own aspirations. So we asked them what they cherish, what they want to preserve, how they want to preserve, why are they attracted toward the current redevelopment, and then if at all it has to be developed, because require more space and so on. So how do we guide this new development? These were, we collected their responses, and this is so our interventions was, the first intervention was to create a heritage trail, uh, connecting different nodes and connecting different social spaces and interesting areas like the wells and the festival square, gymnasium and so on. So here there are a few notes, and I'll tell you what we thought of doing it. That this is an gymnasium which looks like a very frugal structure, but it has won awards in the various athletic competitions. We just thought of adding some sitting areas here, gallery-like, so that even the passers-by can enter and participate in this activities. Now, a nearby church can be, the entry, which is a trap, which can be, provided seating and so on, and that could be rejuvenated. The most important part is that this was the entry to this urban village, and then it was in such a bad state. So we thought that this could be, we could create sitting around the well, anyway the well is covered, and then create some exhibition area for the children, and reactivate this area, this defunct well area. And this one of them, only showing you few possibilities, that this space which was available and used for parking could be used as a some kind of a amphitheater like space, because this was a festival square with a community hall and a temple. And to aid the community, we had a huge community information system in terms of where to go, what to do, and so on in terms of their redevelopment. This heritage, and we did some more heritage listing, and uh, through the Heritage Society of the Mumbai Metropolitan Regional Authority. So then it was, and then we thought of making a book. This book is based on, uh, I think Vaijanti mentioned it, but it is really, it traces the history of urbanization for over 2,500 years, and nearly there more than 2,500 heritage built sites which are still existing. So we so we identified the urban centers over the centuries, and then we could challenge the notion of urbanization only linked to the colonial modernity. There were other cities which were not colonial. In fact, when the city of Mumbai was nothing but jungles and mosquitoes, Sopara city, which is a very poor suburb of Mumbai, was having thriving trade relationships with Arabia, Egypt, China, and so on, and they were exporting and this port here was importing horses from Iran, and they were exporting the birds, peacocks, and the precious stone. So this was a very interesting project. It took us 7 years, but we finished it last year, and we can just see. And we will now come to the policy interventions. So there is a textile neighborhood. I don't have much time, but okay, I will quickly go over this textile neighborhood. Which was, and the land use, and there was a struggle which was waged by the textile mill workers, and we were part of the textile mill struggle and the workers union. So as architects, we got further involved in the struggle for the mill lands. And you can see this neighborhood is a very cohesive neighborhood, which has the best of the railway lines. It has these are the textile mills, nearly 58 textile mills, and then the whole network of infrastructure was built because of this neighborhood, and because of this textile workers who lived. So all around this you see are the tenement housing built for them by the investors, and they had to pay the rent. And there were some, the pink ones you see are the chawls called BDD chawls, which are built by the government. And it had many cultural activities. It had social centers, and so on. So this was and unfortunately now that the mills have closed down, and there are you see the financial centers coming up here. This entire rich infrastructures is offered on platter to these media centers and financial hubs which are now standing on the mill lands. We saw this slide. I'm just showing you so to understand this, why there's a deep engagement of the residents of this neighborhood to the land. These are the tenement housing, which kind of this is the entire neighborhood was shaped by the politics of the trade unions, social institutions, and cultural expressions. Um, these are the internal spaces which became very during the last year pandemic time. This form responded very well during the COVID times. The tenement is a neighborhood by itself. There are many other activities. There are other institutions there are dormitories, all related to the mill workers with multiple activities. And this is a form which has served very well to the community, except that they don't have ownership houses, and now they need repairs, but they are now demolished, and the new high rises will be coming up again through this PPP model. This was a stage of many political movements. You have lots of women participating because it was a mixed zoning, and large percentage of women worked in the textile mills. And they were also a very important component of the struggle. So this community evolved, and they very well. They influenced the community, influenced the economic, politics, culture of and the space of the city in many ways. And after the closure of the mills, the land was seen as a great asset by the mill owners. And post 90s liberalization, real estate development was seen as most profitable. There was, of course, resistance from the mill workers union that they didn't want the mills to close down, but the government also accepted the situation projected by the mill owners. But because of the strong presence of the mill workers union over many years, over many decades, the government did not want to initially at least surrender the land, which was 600 acres to the private mill owners. So the government appointed Charles Correa committee, architect Charles Correa committee, and I'm showing only diagrammatically here that if this was you assume this is 600 acres, of course 600 acres under 58 mills all over, scattered all over. But if you put them together, the Charles Correa suggested that 1/3 would go to the mill owner, but 1/3 would go to the city, which means 1/3 for the city amenities, green spaces, and so on, and 1/3 for the public housing. So at that time, we also opposed this. The workers also opposed this because we thought that we were not convinced that the mills needed to close down. But anyway, that was the reality. And then as architects, we also further intervened in the Charles Correa plan, and we said that whatever goes to the mill owners, at least 30% should go for the production and not just service industries. And the housing component had to be given to the mill workers, and not so 50% at least should be given to the mill workers. So this was acceptable, but the land for the mill owners was completely they developed at their own will. This was a very strong movement in the city because the workers actually went beyond the labor arena into the urban arena. There was okay, we can skip this. Unfortunately, I won't go into the details, but this policy was changed, and the new division of the land reduce the public amenities and public housing to a you can make out how drastically it has reduced the share for the city. And then there was a struggle. There was a strong resistance from the Girangaon neighborhood. That's the textile district, and and through that, it was mostly the workers and the the union, which started for the first time in the history, the workers actually said their claim on the mill lands, also to the neighborhood, because this was a neighborhood, and they when these new and then from the neighborhood to the city, so to the mills, to mill lands, to the neighborhood, to the city. So this was a unique kind of um, uh, a struggle. And this was the first time the high street phoenix came up on the phoenix mill land, and that's where many artists from the area and even from the middle class, they joined here. Even I was part of it. We were sitting here protesting the it had to close down. This high street phoenix, which has a discotheque and entertainments, had to close down, but within a month they restarted. This is what is now happening. Is this is the Jupiter Mills, which is now going to become like this, and right now it is. So there was this is the mill workers who are taking their protest marches, and this is the time when we also formed the Mumbai Peoples Action Committee, which was a spectrum of civil societies, coming together and joining hands. And and I must say that these meetings were held in the architecture school of Rachana Sansad, and that's where we used to meet. And housing activists, women's activists, environmental activists, all of them came together to fight for this mill land, because there was the ruling, which was anyway very discriminatory, was supported by the Supreme Court, and therefore it was a defeat for us. But there was a big struggle which emerged out of that. Unfortunately, the other organizations withdrew after this defeat, but the mill workers could not, and mill workers kept on fighting for their right to housing, and they're still fighting. So some of the mills have surrendered the land for housing, and this is one of the mills, textile mills, where there is a housing for the workers. Well, this was a struggle we were involved with for almost 1.5 decades, 10 years. And my friend Meena Menon, who was one of the union leaders, and we decided to document this history of this mill lands. And this is the oral history of the mill workers, which which we documented, and it's a very interesting testimonies of the not only the mill workers, but the artists there, the women, the political leader, the political cadres, and so on. And after a few years, I was talking about this tenement housing. So this Chawls of Mumbai was, this book also came after that. There are the policy interventions through environment. I think I should skip that probably. Okay, I would come to this our involvement in the making the development plan of Mumbai more responsive to gender. So there were intense interaction process with planners over 2 years, and the representatives of various women's groups, working in housing, health, law, education, sexuality, came together. We formed a committee, and we had this interaction process with the makers of the plan. So this is what the deep development plan is seen like this, and these are the various amenities, and whatever the amenities we had, I was talking about, we have now demanded them to be included as the land use here. I will not go into this. These were all our demands. but somehow only two demands are now, as I said, we wanted livelihood centers, then housing for single women, we wanted women's centers, more of public toilets specifically designated for women, and a change in public transport, shelter homes, homes for distressed women, and so on. Now, ultimately, but I must say that we welcome that, for that, because the first time the authorities actually has introduced a whole chapter on gender in the development plan report. But what they have given us is this multipurpose housing for working women in each administrative ward, and at least one support structure. But in that support structure, they've also added many other amenities which are not necessarily related to gender. So it's a so on one hand, we appreciate this move. On the other hand, we really expect much more than what they have been given us. We will come to the pedagogy now. How much time do I have, Vaijayanti, now? 15 minutes? 10 minutes? What?
I think maybe another 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, then I'll only now speak about the our school and the latest project which we are doing. This is an ongoing project. So this School for Environment and Architecture was set up by 8 architects, and we are specialized in different practices. Some are environmental practice, then there some are into policies, then urban struggles, artists, and so on. So so this school is we want to create a different kind of school, not just not just as a response to the demands of the professional education, but more we are trying to set up an academic space that will help the discipline of architecture, further it, and make it more relevant for the contemporary and the future times. So it's a research based school. That was one of our objectives, and it was to actually produce new knowledge. Engaging with the city is very crucial for us, with the and especially with the current urban struggles. We stress on the socio-political aspects of both research and architectural practice. We are of course involved in spatial relationships, but very importantly, we also stress on the programmatic relationships, which are very crucial and in the wider context of the city. So in a way, we kind of believe in creating an environment which is is multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and so on. This is our eighth. So our 2 batches have now got their undergrad degree. I'm right now teaching a studio. I really don't much enjoy teaching by being part of the online studio, and especially we have taken a very interesting project here. We are looking at the built forms and health, and this is looking at the COVID scenario and how the built forms have responded. And this is the ward of Mumbai, which is the most dense ward. So you can see that it's a very dense ward, and people have gone there, and then there's some of them could visit, some of them could not visit because of COVID, some are out of town. And this is a very vibrant kind of a neighborhood which has multiple activities. There is trading, there is large wholesale markets, there is street vending, there are residences, and manufacturing in the houses, manufacturing on the lower floors of the residential buildings, and so on. We are using the mapillary technique, because some people have not gone there. As I said, it is just we are halfway through. These are various, built types and built forms. These are the chawls which I talked to you about. Then there are religious institutions which responded very well to the COVID scenario. There were many informal labor who could not go home. Some of them migrated. They walked miles to go back home, but there were some who could not go. Many of them were there with their hand carts and so on. So they were provided with food and shelter. And this project is actually then looking towards what kind of interactive public spaces could be created, even after the COVID times, and how the relationship of the people here with the lower floors of the building. And I'm sorry, this is not a large scale, and this is something what I don't like about online, because this is very exciting work we have to see on the small screens. This is also again how the street is behaving, and this is we can't read all this, but if you take this say Buleshwar area, it talks about various possibilities of interventions and creating more environment which is more towards health and care. So they have talked to many stakeholders, including political leaders, their various stakeholders who are living in this area. And these are the different streets and different activities. As I said, it's a very active area. Unfortunately, it really suffered very badly last year because there were job losses and so on. And this is, I said, they're talking to voluntary institutions, then the people who are affected, then people, the healthcare infrastructure, the government machinery, and so on. And then they will actually tell us about. They will actually talk about urban design and their interventions. I think I will stop here now. I'll stop here with these two images. I'm not going to talk about them, but these are our two students in our, one of our first batches.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm done.
Yeah, that was a really kind of a remarkable feat of condensing so many years of practice and into just 45 minutes. I'm sorry that we don't have more time for you to speak, but hopefully in the Q&A, if there are questions, then we can actually pick up some of the threads of what you presented. One thing I'd like to say is that many of the issues you discussed are familiar to our students from this city, from New York City. There are lots of parallels, of course. Except that for our students, I would say, imagine this is a city with many more languages, many more social divisions than even the ones you find here, which might be hard to imagine, but that is the case. And I'd like to also say that the work, of course, embodies very much the spirit of what we, Cesare and I, have conceived of as the architectures of care. So I'd love for now to open the floor for questions. Thanks.
May I ask the first question? Well, first of all, thank you for the lecture. It was wonderful to hear your journey, your architectural and political journey. I was especially interested by one of the first projects that you showed, the mass housing project, by a couple of things that I think resonate with something that we also do or at least a number of studios do in our school. So one, if you could say more about the structure of the trust that you said was instrumental for getting this project going. And then I was fascinated by the concept of cluster identities. So in relation to a multicultural city, and I echo here Rajanti. So we're also, again, to some extent, we're also dealing with a similar city, certainly from the multicultural point of view. And I'd be curious, so if you could explain a bit more about that, and in fact, how that also translated that in a very specific architecture with those bridges, with those green spaces, linking, in fact, the different portions of the building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Your first question was regarding the structure, right? Of the
yes, the
construction.
trust.
Yeah. The construction structure you're talking about.
I mean more you mentioned a trust that was so.
Trust. Oh yes. 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 This is as I told you, this group which initiated this project was part of the Socialist Party of India, and they were this person Mrunal Gore, she and her colleague who was a lawyer, and he was interested in creating housing, and especially the history of housing and the way the redevelopment was happening. Of course, they were not looking at free housing, so it took a long time, but they started registering people who wanted housing, and basically from the same suburbs, because I guess there were people who supported Mrunal Gore. She was the member of parliament, and they supported her, a very forthright, very honest, intense person, and that is how they could mobilize people. Otherwise, it was not like left open for everyone. So people who came to them, who were part of their part of their suburb, and then that they formed a trust. Trust had these members. The people who were wanting the housing had to pay some membership fees, so they became the part of the trust, and there was some monthly installment they would contribute towards the making of the homes. So this was and it was very well managed for many years by this socialist group of leaders. I mean, there was at one point of time, interestingly, at one point of time, the construction stopped because there were lack of funds, and that is the time the contractor, the contractor also got so much involved in this entire, a new structure of creating mass housing, that he put his own money in the kitty, to and so that the main contractor, and so so it did not stop. The construction work did not stop, and it continued. I don't know whether that answers your question, but it was easy for these people because they belonged to a political ideology and political party, so they had infrastructure, resources, and cadre with them. Your second question was the cluster identities. There are many identities which can emerge in our city. It could be on community basis. It could be on the region where they migrated from. So people from north can have a separate community housing, or people who are the traders who are coming from Gujarat, and you find cooperative society model, which was not anymore. Cooperative society model is almost now forgotten, but they came up because of their identities, similar needs, similar aspiration, mainly class, and they would be working in the, but they were also on the caste basis. In this case, they were not necessarily belonging to any caste or community, but they were, but they shared the same class. Most of them were, as I said, informal labor or something. And these identities which have come up is after, is after co-inhabiting. These are not the original identities which are getting reflected. It is not that they came from, because these were by lottery system. It's not that they could choose which apartment, these are apartments were, tenements were allotted on the lottery system. So this kind of, relationship emerged only after they shifted to this. And then there is a probably, like the students hostel, there's a competition between, say, hostel number, like in Indian Institute of Technology, there's a competition between hostel 8 and hostel 9. So similarly, these cooperative societies within a cluster will have a different way to articulate their separate identity. It's nothing to do with the original caste or community identities. It's co-inhabiting that.
So may I join the conversation first again with to reiterate Cesare and our thanks for such a compact review of a career that is rich with work. My first question is, I hope we can get hold of your publications and use them and put them in our library for our students to look at, and not only our students, but me. All of us. There's an extraordinary body of work that we need to make accessible. So perhaps you and I can talk about this privately, or Vijayante and I can work through a way to purchase copies and donate them to the library. I understand Mumbai in a way I never did before, and so I am astonished at how ignorant I was. So thank you for that. I'm very taken with this battle between you and your colleagues as the voices of the working class, particularly the textile workers about to lose their jobs in Mumbai, against the vaunted heroes of modernism, Charles Correa being one of them. And this is that it was to me interesting and astonishing to see that Charles Correa was working for developers, right? In working for the mill owners, we could say, in developing a plan that ended up disenfranchising hundreds of thousands of people. And I just wondered if you could speak a bit about that. Is this a unique instance, or are we learning through your talk about contestations in Indian architecture practice that we in the United States should know more about?
Well, it's an interesting question. Charles Correa was appointed by the government, and he took it for granted that the mills were going to close. He never questioned the closure of the mills. In the given scenario, the one aspect of his contribution was that, of course, there are private mills as well as the public mills. This was a government appointed committee headed by Charles Correa. The chief minister was heading the committee. There were top bureaucrats and top, not political leaders, but the top bureaucrats part of the committee. And in spite of that, this committee was denied access by the private mill owners. There were about 50-50 about I think 25 private mills and about 26 government-owned mills. So they could only visit the government mills because the committee also thought of identifying the heritage structures.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wonder how Charles Korea accepted this, that there are these 25 mills, so they just deny access to the this high profile committee. That's one. Then he also, as I said, took it for granted that he didn't question that. And when this question was asked to him, he said that was not in my terms of reference. That to think about the workers. But I must say that he changed his position a lot. I remember him, he see there are two the contributions at two level. One is that that committee, with the help of the architectural schools, identified the identified the structures of heritage value. So he identified them and he wanted to protect them. And his another contribution was that, if you remember the plan where all the mills are scattered all over,
Right.
he wanted to somehow connect them, and at least there were some 5 or 6 mills where he actually made a detailed plan of. They were connected with each other. So there were interesting land uses, of course, interesting architecturally, but definitely opposed at that time. He said these old tenements housing need not be demolished, the mills need not be demolished, but they can become artist studios, and in a way, gentrification of this area. But then one fine day he called me and he said he had read my book, 100 Years, 100 Voices, and then he would like to meet me, and we met together. And then he was really, he was very unhappy that at his 1/3 share was reduced. He was not party to that reduction of the land use, and he tried his level best to and he and belonging to that class, he was interacting with the top mill owners, he was interacting with the top bureaucrats, but ultimately all of them actually let him down. And that's one of the reasons why he just left the city and went to Delhi to head the art commission. But also, let me tell you, when the Supreme Court judgment went against us, which means it supported the reduction of land, that is why when this kind of a rainbow coalition came in, he was part of that. He and other of his other friends of his class actually came for the protest march in the open Maidan, and that is not expected of him and his colleagues. But he was there. He was in the march there. And we used to have several meetings after that. He was under the impression that he was still going to get an opportunity to do something better, but he was completely let down.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Fascinating story.
Hi, Neera. Thank you for that
Hi.
talk. I'm Nandini Bagchi, and I have been teaching from your book, both the book about the mills and also about the Chawls, to our students here at Spitzer for several years. I did a global architecture history class, and that was one of the most interesting stories out there. So we definitely have discussed it in the past. And I have to say, I felt so emotional when you kind of started to describe how long you were involved, in this struggle. It made me feel, the sense of time and persistence in your practice, and all through, just like how you move from the activism, but in the most matter-of-fact way, just how you addressed right now the gray zones of how people change their minds. It's not like this single-minded endeavor, but that architects constantly, move between different points of, okay, who could be an ally here, and what would be the best way to achieve some results. And so my question, as I listen to you, is what does it mean to have this type of practice today? So you dealt with the Mumbai mills in almost another time. what are your students thinking of? How do they model themselves upon your practice? And this is a question that comes up with my students who are interested in these kinds of issues very much so. What are some ways in which this is playing out in today's Mumbai?
Well, your question about the school and the students, you see, as I said, this entire environment in the school is very pro, I mean, it is all our studio projects are also, situated in the larger social scenario or political scenario. It's not direct like that, but it ultimately leads and the discussions, and it is true of our entire faculty, that we engage them in some way. We bring these issues into the studio. All our classes are also informed by what's happening around, and especially the gender aspect is taken very, very seriously in our studios. There are some special projects which are based on gender. I mean, they did, some of the students had gone to study the cities which are these emerging economies, and they went to the university or college campuses where there was a complete this was in south Vijayawada, where there was a complete separation of male students and female students. I mean, they couldn't even walk on the same road, on one side of the divider, men, on side of the other side of the divider was female students. And this was, and they had to take up that project too. And it's not only that the women students are taking, male students are also taking the, these issues and bringing them into their their speculations also. There is a lot of provocation, of course, in terms of program which we give them. So I'm very happy to say that, and this I'm taking a studio after a long time because I just didn't want to do it during the COVID times, and I'm really wary of that. But I'm very pleasantly surprised to hear the students. They are so conscious of the social realities, the caste communities, especially the communal divide which is there. And this project they are doing is very intensely physically divided. On one hand this is Bhendi Bazaar, Islampura, and so on the other side there is Kuleshwar Kalbadevi, which is very Hindu, and this so they're taking it. It's very mature. I can see that their approach is a very matured approach. But as I said, because it's right from first year, they in some way or the other they get exposed to this various urban issues.